Good evening. I'm Dr. Sherry Ben, Chair of the Texas State University 2020 Election Task Force. The Texas State 2020 Elections Task Force is a group of students, faculty, and staff working together to facilitate and prepare our university community for engagement during the 2020 election season. We do this by promoting, encouraging, and coordinating collaborative opportunities for constructive and educational interactions throughout the election season. Tonight is an example of the kind of work that we do. My job this evening is to assist our moderator, CJ Satina, with tonight's town hall. Thank you so much for joining us. And now I'll turn our program over to CJ. CJ, you're up.
Good evening. My name is CJ Satina, a student member of the Texas State 2020 Elections Task Force and member of the Young Democratic Socialists of America at Texas State. Thank you all for being here with us. I will serve as your moderator for tonight's town hall. This evening's town hall will feature local San Marcos candidates running for city council seats and the mayor's position as well, that students, staff, and faculty may be voting on for this upcoming election. During our town hall tonight, candidates Alyssa Garza, Shane Scott, Zach Sembrano, Omar Baca, Miguel Arredondo will be zooming in live to answer questions about their perspectives on various questions that were created through a bipartisan student and faculty collaboration. As a San Marcos City Council meeting was moved to tonight, some of our candidates could not attend live. Candidates Ed Mahogany and Mark Rockymore, currently sitting on the council along with Mayor Jane Hewson, participated in recordings prior to this event, which we will share with you. We wanted to provide recordings of candidates who are unable to attend so that you will have at least an opportunity to hear directly from them, even as they were unable to be with us tonight. First, we have a welcome by two of our student leaders, Mr. Christian Gavassos and Trevor Newman. Then information will be shared from the candidates. We will also hear from the chair of our philosophy department, our voter-friendly campus coordinator, and then Dr. Penn will close us out for tonight. At this time, I would like to introduce Christian and Trevor.
Hi, y'all. My name is Trevor Newman. I'm the president of College Democrats at Texas State, and I also serve on the safety subcommittee for the elections task force here at Texas State. And I just wanted to remind you how important it is that you participate in your democracy and be kind to others this coming election. Over 500,000 students across the nation have registered to vote, and if you've registered to vote, you're part of that number. And it's so important that you go out this November and you vote at your local polling location, which is the Performing Arts Center here on campus. And then I also want to encourage you to participate in events like this week during our voter engagement week. Later this week, you'll have opportunities to meet the candidates running for different offices on campus. Of course, you'll do that safely regarding COVID regulations and stuff like that. But I hope that I see you out there this week, and I hope that you have a great week ahead of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christian Cavazos. I'm the chapter chairman of the Young Conservatives of Texas State. I would just like to thank you all again for coming in and actually sitting down to watch it. This was a lot of hard work put together by students and faculty. We have the College Democrats, Vote-Friendly Campus, and the Young Conservatives of Texas. And again, just thank you for all coming out. And we're going to have our city council members speak tonight. And please pay attention and really listen to the platforms that they are to make an educated vote. You know, a lot of y'all, this might be y'all's first time voting. So the fact that y'all do it right is really important. You know, I'm so proud of Texas State for putting this on and for all these other orgs coming together and being able to make this happen. So again, have a good night, enjoy the candidates, and be safe.
I would like to say that though everyone who will not be here with us live, we appreciate those who took the time to provide us recordings so that our town hall attendees will have the opportunity to hear from them as well. I want to give a special thanks to Trevor for reaching out to the candidates and to Catherine for interviewing those who provided recordings. The questions for this town hall have been developed in a bipartisan manner with participation from students in both the Republican and Democratic parties. Out of respect for our guest time, we are going to go ahead and get started. We will begin with the race for San Marcos City Council Place 3. Our first candidate this evening will be Councilmember Ed Mahakanen, and he has graciously provided a pre-recorded an interview with Ms. Catherine Wicker. Dr. Mahakanen, the incumbent candidate, is also a professor of political science here at Texas State University.
All right. Hello, Dr. Mahakanen. Welcome. I'm going to go ahead and start with having you introduce yourself a little bit to everyone.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'm Ed Mahakanen. I'm a current member of the San Marcos City Council Place 3. I'm running for re-election. My current service started in December of 2016, but I've also served on the City Council from 1996 to 2000, and then again from 2001 to 2006. And I have taught political science at Texas State University since 1990.
Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and start with the first question, which is, what are your priorities in seeking or holding public office? What experiences and or characteristics might make you the best candidate for this office?
Well, really, it's up to my fellow citizens to decide if I'm the best for the job, and I defer to their wisdom and experience on that. Frankly, I am very concerned for our community and our state and nation when it comes to COVID-19. We have had so many deaths in our country now. I'm right around 210,000. This is a particularly strange virus in that you will have numbers going down, both in terms of the actually having it and very serious illness or death. All the numbers go down, and then all of a sudden they're going back up again. So this is a pernicious virus. It has had a negative economic effect on our community. We need to do all that we can to help mitigate the negative effects on our residents and our small businesses. And I've already asked the city staff to look at potential other funding mechanisms that our city would be allowed to use to directly help people within the constraints of our Constitution and Texas laws.
Thank you so much for the answer. Moving on to our next question. What is your stance on arresting protesters through local and state law enforcement? What constitutes an arrestable offense during protesting?
Well, I mean, obviously the right of the people to peacefully assemble is a civil liberty in our Bill of Rights, and it was something very important at the time of the founding and throughout our history. I mean, I can't say anything about state law enforcement officials, but as a general rule, going back to Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, when speech is an incitement to violence, well, then that's when it can be stopped. But when people are peacefully assembling and protesting, there doesn't seem to me to be any reason to arrest someone if there's violence against other people, if there's destruction of property, then there can be local law enforcement step in. But I don't know if you've noticed, but we have had a number of protests in our town, and everything has been fine. People have marched, people have spoke, and that's part of our system of government.
Thank you so much. All right, as we're moving on to the next question of this, you mentioned this earlier about COVID-19 being a concern. How might you see the federal, state, and or local government assisting communities during the COVID-19 pandemic? Respond to the level of office you are seeking.
Sure. Well, I mean, anytime a government says to its citizens, in whatever capacity they're in, individual citizens, homeowners, business owners, people employed, that that they can't do something that they normally are allowed to do, well then, excuse me, it seems to me that then government has a responsibility to help them during a time when the citizens are being directed to alter their behavior on the basis of protecting public health. And I will say that if as a citizen, I hope that Congress will be able to agree to a new funding bill that now seems to be back on track. President Trump reversed himself, said, yes, I want you to come up with an agreement. That is vital for people because remember how long this has been going on and that people have been unemployed and businesses have been closed. So if you look at what we have done on the city council, we have moved money to COVID-19 mitigation. We have passed an emergency law that allows restaurants that are open to have parking. I apologize. I have a dog. He's a dachshund. He's 4 years old, and he's the old man in the neighborhood and thinks no one can walk in front of the house. So I apologize. He saw something.
You're okay. I have a puppy, so I understand.
Okay. Maybe the two of them get together for a play date. But in all seriousness, we have passed COVID mitigation funding to help businesses, very open-ended, because we didn't want to second-guess the businesses over what they had done already. So we said, look, as long as it's for COVID, knock yourself out, please use it. We passed an emergency law that said parking right in front of their businesses can be used for takeout and pickup. We also passed a law delaying by 90 days, which I believe was renewed for the beginning of evictions. We also waived the late fees on our utility bill payments. So we have, within the limited authority of our city government, we have done everything we can. But I have also asked, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, I asked the city staff to please look up the possibility of our city being a 4A or 4B city. And that means that we can use sales tax revenue potentially for things that we otherwise would not be able to use it in. And so I don't know if we'll be talking about it later today at our meeting or if it will be in the second meeting in October, but I know the staff has been doing a lot of research on it. So I just want to be very honest. I think this virus is pernicious and we're going to be dealing with it next year. Dealing with it next year will be bad because of the negative effects it's already had this current calendar year. So, people who may have dipped into savings, maybe relatives have helped them. The money is running out of the tub. So we really need to be more creative about what we as a community can do to help our citizens.
Okay, thank you so much. Our next question continues talking a little bit about COVID-19. Many students are working and or will be entering the job market. What strategies do you plan for economic growth in this COVID era?
Well, I'm a member of the Greater San Marcos Partnership, which is a regional organization for economic development. It is going through creating a new master plan, which obviously was delayed because of the onset of the virus. Obviously, people are thinking now, okay, what are the longer term implications, economic implications for this virus? Is this virus just going to be virus number one? And are we going to be having to deal with viruses of this nature in the future, even if it's a different virus? So what I would like to see us do is to frankly diversify our economic development outreach. The Greater San Marcos Partnership has done an excellent job reaching out in the state and outside of the state to have businesses interested in us, but we have to do more of that. And basically, we need to have a community conversation that says, what kind of businesses would we like to see that provide a decent salary plus benefits, especially health benefits, and just say to those businesses, we have a great town. You would be a good fit. Let's talk.
Thank you so much. We're going to shift a little bit. And the next question is, what is your view on immigration, and what policies will you pursue related to the changes in the current immigration policy in your jurisdiction?
Well, municipalities in the United States are constitutionally considered to be legal creatures of the state governments. The U.S. Supreme Court decided that constitutional doctrine in a series of cases in the 1830s and 1840s. So no municipality in Texas can do anything that the Texas government cannot do. And immigration is a federal responsibility. We can't pass a law that says, yeah, what Congress did is interesting, but we're going to go our own way. I mean, that's not tenable. There are very real limits. A couple years ago, I'm sure you heard of SB 4, Senate Bill 4. The city council passed a resolution against SB 4, and it ended up being unanimous. And I voted for that resolution against SB 4. So it seems to me that our first responders have things that are better for them to do than to be compelled by the federal or state officials to aid those higher governments' efforts in their public policy priorities. I mean, the federal government and the state government has a much larger budget than we do. Why are they dipping into our limited resources to help them do something that they say is their priority? If it's their priority, they can find the money for it.
Okay, thank you so much. Your final question is, what housing protection measures would you support for students?
Well, I already have supported a law that was passed by the San Marcos City Council in 2017. And it was a brand new law, and I want to credit then council member, now Mayor Jane Hewson, with bringing it to the council. It's very simple, but it says if really anybody, but if a student has paid a deposit for a new apartment and that apartment is not ready by the time of the move-in date, the apartment management either has to reimburse the student for the deposit or to provide alternative housing. And I think that was just very, very important as a protection for people. I mean, when students come in to their university, they should not be facing any hassles of housing. They've got enough on their minds with their classes. And I know that housing issues can have a very negative effect on their educational life.
Thank you so much for taking the time to record this. And all my videos, I've been reminding students the first day to vote early is October 13th, and they can vote at the Performing Arts Center on campus. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you very much for having me, Catherine. Hope you have a great rest of the week.
Next, we have Alyssa Garza, who is with us live via Zoom. Ms. Garza, do you mind if you can introduce yourself?
Can y'all hear me okay?
Perfect.
Awesome. Sorry, my speaker was lagging. Can you repeat what you just said? I'm sorry, totally blurred.
Just asking if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Alisa Garza. Well, I was born and raised in San Marcos. In Laredo. I moved to San Marcos for college in 2008, and I stuck around to complete my graduate program, and then just fell in love with the city and the community. So I decided to stick around. Most of my time in San Marcos has been working for the university at some capacity up until recently. I worked for the Center for Diversity and Gender Studies. I worked for Tech School Safety Center, and now I'm working for the local nonprofit Mano Amiga. And I'm now running for office to help bring diverse perspectives to the table and help us emerge from COVID in a healthy and responsible way.
All right, well, thank you for joining us tonight for this evening for the virtual town hall. We'll jump right into the first question. What experience and/or characteristics make you the best candidate for this office?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Give me 1 second, okay? I'm going to prop this up so it stops blocking the audio. 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me on your end okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, now let me get my speaker back on. So, I mean, my video back on. And let me switch this. Okay. I'm so sorry. I moved offices to like the back room, and I think the Wi-Fi is lagging and it's just a mess. So the question was my background, right?
Yep.
Cool. So my professional and academic background provide me with the skills and knowledge necessary to interpret and understand complex social issues. I have a bachelor's of science in applied sociology and a master's of arts in sociology and a master's of education. So I'm able to conduct program evaluations, look into policy, have experience writing policy briefs. But beyond that, beyond all the academic and professional background, I think what separates me from others is that I am really passionate and effective in engaging diverse perspectives and intentional community engagement. And so bringing that to the table and combining that with my academic and professional background, I think will provide for meaningful solutions that we can keep track of and assess and make sure that it aligns with the community's desires.
All right, what kinds of criminal justice reforms, including incarceration and law enforcement, would you suggest for addressing racial inequalities?
Right, so like I mentioned, this is my personal opinion, not as my role through a staffer as Mano Amiga, but I ended up at that job because I was passionate about criminal justice reform. And so just given everything that I've learned in school and also with my experience working within the community with directly impacted, justice impacted individuals, I would begin by increasing in community participation by those directly impacted by the system, those directly impacted by policing practices. In addition to that, I would build on the cite and release ordinance. As you all might know, we're the first city in the state of Texas to pass an ordinance for that, and just really push for transparent data sharing and just keeping track of how that's going. We have seen multiple cities across the state of Texas look towards our model to emulate it. And so I think it's important that we are intentional in keeping track of that and kind of seeing the glows and the grows, and just engaging in genuine and thoughtful conversation to ensure that all voices are heard in those conversations. And that's
Right,
my cat crying, I'm so sorry.
All right, to the next question. What is your stance on arresting protesters through local and state law enforcement? What constitutes an arrestable offense during protesting?
Awesome. Yeah. So as somebody who protested a lot as a student and even as a staff, I supported students who were engaging in their constitutional right to protest. I think that it is very important that any leader, including elected officials or otherwise, keep track of the statewide conversation regarding protesters. So Governor Abbott is threatening to criminalize the use of bail funds for protesters. If elected, and even if I'm not elected, I will denounce that, as we've seen through Mano Amiga's work, how impactful bail funds have been to get folks out of jail, and particularly, I think we've helped over 30 folks through that project. And in terms of protesters, I think that just given the national conversation that we're having and just everything that's happening in the state of Texas and at a smaller scale here in San Marcos, I think that we have to call for proper training and communication with our officers so that they are aware of de-escalation and practices if necessary. Things tend to get heated in certain spaces where protesting is happening. So I think it all comes down to setting high expectations and monitoring them. So that's my answer.
All right, to the next question. What are your plans to address and mitigate the effects of climate change? This is really an important issue, in my opinion.
Right, and so this has actually been a question that's been kind of touched on by other forums, just given, our natural resources and, like just the importance of preserving them and being intentional and being mindful of our natural resources locally and just like on our impact on the earth at, just like a larger scale. In the scope of San Marcos, as somebody who was directly impacted by natural disasters like the 2 historical flooding events, and I lived in Blanco Gardens, I know firsthand what that type of event occurrences, what type of impact it has in our communities. And so I would just work to build on our current programs regarding climate change, sustainability. I think that I have experienced firsthand the great work that our community services department does, just trying to push forth information regarding recycling, reusing, the fact that, whenever there's events that happen in city property or around large areas, you can go check out bins from the recreation department, and they provide you with everything you need, a little cheat sheet to be able to do things like that. That's just one program among many. So just building on that and adding a cultural competency lens to it. Well, I appreciate a lot of the information disseminated by these city departments. I think that an area of growth is to include the material, which is great, educational videos, infographics, also in Spanish. We know that sustainable practices and using every part of something until you can't use it no more is deeply ingrained in the Latino culture. And I think if we can capitalize on that, we can see an even bigger increase in our just daily practices to contribute to addressing climate change.
All right, many students are working or will be entering the job market. What strategies do you plan for economic growth in this COVID era?
Oh, yes, sorry. You're just lagging, so I'm just trying to get it's my bad. It's my feed. So basically, I think that the city needs to continue their COVID relief efforts. I think they need to they need to provide emergency aid to our community. That way they're able to survive and be able to balance working currently, continuing to work and paying for bills. But also we need to pour into our small local businesses. I know a lot of students who their place of work, anywhere from downtown to just all across San Marcos is like their second family. And they depend on those local businesses to basically pay the bills. So I think we need to empower them with the resources that they need to remain open as we emerge to the pandemic. I also think that it's important to just reevaluate the money and resources that we put in as a city towards social services. I think we need to understand that in order for somebody to be to have a better sense of well-being, to be able to even work through such a heavy time, they need to have access to things like mental health services, services navigating unemployment, services navigating how to obtain jobs. I think that there's a lot of room for growth in that aspect as well.
All right. What is your view on immigration, and what local policies will you pursue that address the needs of the immigrant groups?
I love that y'all included this question. I think that a lot of current elected officials tend to lean on the fact that immigration is largely a federally handled issue. However, there are a lot of things that we can do as a city to help this group of folks, our neighbors. As part of my role at Mano Amiga, I secured funding for an emergency pantry to provide non-citizens with these types of resources. The reason why I was so adamant on securing that funding along with my coworker is because there is a very clear need for services like this. Many of the social services that we have very strict guidelines where folks who may not have a piece of paper that says that they belong here, they don't qualify for these services. So just things like, creating a better system where they can have government issued IDs, like through a library or through the county, providing resources regarding publicly funded, like legal representation, but just honestly, something as simple as disseminating information in more than the English language on services that are available and don't have rigid guidelines is something that we can do. I think that it takes bold leadership to acknowledge that we have a substantial population of non-citizens and that we are falling short in addressing their needs.
All right, you answered part of this question earlier, but how might you see local government assisting communities during the pandemic?
You said assisting?
Yes, the communities during this pandemic.
Right, I think it just goes back to intentional engagement. I think that there's a lot of folks in current conversations in city council, there are a lot of folks who tend to say things that lead me to believe that there's a disconnect between the realities of the people we've elected to represent us and everyday folks. So I would begin by, reaching out to the community to ask them what they need and then figuring out how to get them that. So what I have been seeing personally, boots on the ground doing direct COVID relief aid, is folks don't have basic needs, the essential items like laundry detergent, soap, food, fresh food, diapers, things like that. And then just getting creative in our solutions. I am kind of worried about the fact that we have a very, very low census response rate, and much of our federal relief will be determined by that count. And so that does worry me. And so in that regard, we'll need bold leadership to be able to seek out additional funding to be able to support our community as we emerge from COVID. San Marcos was the fastest growing city for like 3 consecutive years in the not so distant past. And so I'm kind of worried about that. But I guess we just have to get creative and figure it out.
All right, what housing protection measures would you support for students?
So that is a great question. As somebody who lived in multiple apartments as a Bobcat, and having to make a lot of trips to the attorney for students to help navigate that. One housing protection measure I would do, I would look into is basically finding ways to hold these apartments more accountable. I know folks have said it's difficult, but I honestly think that we're probably just not getting creative enough. Even just things like just making it a public priority, making it a well-known priority that in the city we care about our students and we're going to do what we can do to protect them. I think makes a difference. I think it's important for our elected officials to set that tone and expectation. And to be quite frank, that's not something that I have seen within the last handful of years. I haven't seen people take bold stances to say, you know, these students, while maybe they're, you know, just visitors for a couple of years, like this is their home for now, and so we're going to protect them. I think expanding on services like that we have, you know, as you know, I'm not a student anymore, but I had as a student, which is helping students navigate any legal issues. I think that the city can do more on their behalf, because I know sometimes it's difficult to even get in with the attorney for students. They're pretty overwhelmed, particularly when students need it the most, which is at the beginning of signing the lease and at the end when moving out. And so I think the city should acknowledge that students historically have been preyed upon by you know, apartment complexes, and that we should do what we can to provide them with the means to defend themselves and to protect themselves.
All right, how do you envision the growth of San Marcos?
How do I envision the growth of San Marcos? That's a good question. I am a foreverly optimistic. I think that we have a lot of great resources and assets in San Marcos. We have the university. We have you know, folks in our community who show up and speak about what they care about. But I think that if we are going to emerge from the pandemic responsibly, and if we are going to push towards responsible growth, that we have to get very serious in that conversation and bring more people to the table. In any policy changes or conversations, I think that generally speaking, currently, there's a lack of representation regarding everybody. So it's not very often that I hear more than like two dominant narratives when it comes to like housing and development when we think of growth, or we only hear like very limited voices when it comes to how do we deal with, you know, university population growing. And while the voices that do show up are important, I think that we have to recognize our city's growing, and elected officials need to modernize the way that they do outreach to ensure that they're capturing more perspectives when deciding how to move forward with responsible growth that will help us all.
All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Ms. Garza. Next, we will focus on the race for San Marcos City Council Place 4. Our video clip will be of incumbent council member Mark Rockymore, who cannot attend tonight due to the city council meeting. Mr. Rockymore is a reading teacher in Del Valley ISD. This interview was conducted by Catherine Wicker, our voter-friendly campus coordinator, and she will be posing many of the same questions. Let's cue up the video.
All right. Hello, Councilmember Rockymore. So I want to go ahead and start with having you introduce yourself to everyone.
Hello, my name is Mark Rockymore. I am your current sitting city council member for Place 4 in this great city of San Marcos. I am running for re-election this year to continue the task of moving the city of San Marcos forward in regards to disparate issues. I am a geographer by training. I was ABD PhD up there on the Hill at Texas State University. And I was also on the Associated Student Government and the Graduate Student Council as well at Texas State. So I spent many years on the university campus. Coming out into the city, being a resident and working here, I have done quite a few things. I have worked at the high school, and I have also worked as a glass bottom boat driver. And there may still be some of you there who took my glass bottom boat trip some years ago. Now I am a secondary teacher. I teach reading comprehension to ninth graders at Del Valley High School. And again, I sit on city council, to which I hope with your assistance, I will be able to return to continue our environmental equity and justice movement here in the city of San Marcos. We lead the country now, and we will continue to do so with your continued support.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question for you.
Mm-hmm.
What are your priorities in seeking or holding office? What experience and/or characteristics make you the best candidate for this office?
Well, I believe my life experience puts me aligned with the times, or puts me in line with our current times. We just had a summer of discontent here in the United States, where a lot of issues that are national in scope came to bear. And a lot of people were involved in this movement to achieve social justice on many different scales. And that effort is occurring here in the city of San Marcos as well, and it has been occurring for quite some time. It was last summer that we began a criminal justice reform committee that was able to pass cite and release as an ordinance. And in cite and release, there are a number of issues that kind of prepare us for the criminal justice future, in that we made it so that Class C misdemeanors, some Class B and Class A misdemeanors, you don't get arrested for, you get cited for instead. And so with that movement, as well as a lot of the sustainability issues that we're dealing with in the city of San Marcos, these things are what affect our future most directly. And they are showing up in the present as well. Our region of Texas is currently moving from a semi-arid to an arid environment, and it's important that we move in the direction of preparing ourselves sustainably in order to be ready for that future. So we have to secure the water future, as well as make sure that our city is properly delineated for a new type of environment that we will experience sooner rather than later.
Okay, so you mentioned a little bit about the unrest that our country has been facing. So your next question is, what is your stance on arresting protesters through local and state law enforcement? What constitutes an arrestable offense during protesting?
Well, I think that our city did a great job during the summertime in not becoming actively involved in the protests that were occurring here in the city of San Marcos. We had a number of Black Lives Matter protests, as well as others. And during that time, there was very little, if any, police presence around those protests. So there were no incidences that occurred where arrests became necessary. Now, what we've seen nationally is that when arrests do occur, they often occur when property damage happens, when people are just randomly breaking windows and things of that sort. And when private property is being destroyed, then there is an incident where arrests do need to occur, right? But if protesters are just out there yelling and screaming and have their signs and they are doing what protesters do, which is what we are allowed to do, which is our First Amendment right, I don't believe that cops should interfere with that. And I know here in San Marcos, our officers have not interfered with that. And as long as I'm on city council, they will not interfere with that. And if they do, then they will have to answer to the city. They'll have to answer to their police chiefs, and they'll have to answer to the city council at some point, as well as the citizens.
Okay, thank you so much. How might you see federal, state, and or local government assisting during COVID-19 pandemic? Respond to the office that you are currently seeking.
Yeah, well, we've been dealing with the pandemic since I've been in office. This happened or really settled in March. and I've been on city council since December of 2018. So it has been a lesson in sober economics and politics to be on city council during this time and participate in the decision-making process that has been going on. I am also the deputy mayor pro tem, so I have met with the mayor pro tem, which is council member Ed Mahawkanen, and the mayor, Jane Hewson, on a regular basis to talk about some of the decisions that she makes. As our mayor and our executive officer, she has extended powers, kind of like governor's powers in a sense, during an emergency declaration, which is where we are right now. So a lot of decisions she makes on her own, but she also interacts with us in order to ask us our opinion on certain things as well. So we are involved closely in that process. Now, there are a lot of things that we need to do in order to move forward and experience the type of successes that other countries have experienced, and things that we, frankly, have not been able to do because we don't have support from the national level. Now, hopefully that will shift in November, and we'll start to get that support so that we can implement things that would allow us to do contact tracing and to do spot quarantines where necessary in order to stop outbreaks wherever they occur. But I know that I will do my best to work at the city level and the county level in order to implement some of these things that have been successful in other countries so that the United States can step up to the plate as a first world country, if you want to use that type of terminology.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Many students are working and or will be entering the job market. What strategies do you plan for economic growth in this COVID era?
Well, I'm a real big proponent of small business and making sure we can incubate small businesses here. And this includes student-led businesses as well as businesses by our residents, because during this time, we're seeing many businesses close. And these don't just include small business, but also a lot of large businesses are as well. You know, we're starting to see the end of malls, you know, with their anchor stores, the big Sears and JCPenney's and all Macy's and all of those. They're all going out of business. They're experiencing issues that will lead to bankruptcy, and that is the case at the local level as well. So I believe it's important that we have a sustainable local economy. And what that means is making sure that we draw in all of our production aspects in the region. So that could mean that we put a greater emphasis on getting a lot of our produce from local producers rather than relying upon long supply chains that stretch around the country and around the world. So making sure that we're sustainable in our region, and that if something happens so that our supply chains are broken to other regions, other states, other nations, then we need to be able to live here on our own. And then we live at the juncture of four different regions. You know, we've got the Texas Hill Country on one side, we've got the Blackland Prairies on the other side, we've got the Intercoastal Plain moving away from us. We have the greatest diversity in the state of Texas right here in San Marcos. That's why we're the jewel of Texas, you know? We're the jewel of Central Texas because we have everything we need here. So we need to protect it, we need to bring it together, and we need to make a plan in order to provide for our people during what could be rough times moving forward.
Thank you so much for answering that. Your next question is, what is your view of immigration and what policies will you pursue related to changes in the current immigration policy at your level?
Well, I believe that ICE overstepped itself during the tenure of our current president. And I believe that there have been efforts made to deport people that are unnecessary. I believe the Dreamers need to stay, and I believe they need to be supported. I believe we need to reopen the borders to immigration from other places and to immigration from south of the border in particular. And I believe that those people who are here need to be given a route to citizenship that does not include deportation. So I support the aims of a local organization called Mano Amiga, and I support everything that we need to do in order to protect our San Marcans, whether or not they have documentation. I believe that since they are here and since their children are here and their families are here, then they are American citizens. And we need to do what we can in order to make sure that they receive that designation without fear of leaving and having to return to countries that they may have fled from or that may be dangerous for them to return to. And in some cases, countries that they've never been to or countries that they haven't been to since they were very small.
Okay, thank you. Your final question is, what housing protection measures would you support for students?
Well, we have a lot of housing in the city of San Marcos for students. I know that we have a lot of rent by the bedroom apartments that are available for them. We have a number downtown that have been built and they're continuing to be built. And so I believe that there is an adequate supply of housing here in the city of San Marcos for students currently. And there are different zones around town where student housing occurs, as well as single family houses where many students live and duplexes. Now, I'd like to increase the housing stock to add townhomes and maybe even tiny home communities within the city of San Marcos for those who wish to inhabit such domiciles, right? And so I believe in a diversity of housing stock, and I believe in allowing whoever is able to live in that housing to do so. So I don't really have any limitations in regards to where students should live in the city of San Marcos. I believe they can live and should live anywhere as long as they are complying with the development code and the housing code that we have in place currently and are continuing to work upon and perfect as we move forward.
All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me this morning.
Sure.
For any students that are watching this, the first day to go vote is October 13th at the Performing Arts Center on campus. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm going to stop the recording.
All right, next we have former Councilmember Shane Scott. He is also running for San Marcos City Council Place 4. Mr. Scott was previously a council member from 2010 to 2015. Mr. Scott is a small business owner. Mr. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself? Remember to go vote early. It starts next week on October 13th, and you have until October 30th to go vote. Don't go on election day since there'll probably be long lines and you'll be less likely to avoid COVID as well. Also, remember to bring an ID with you. A student ID doesn't work. Bring your driver's license, a passport, even a military ID works, your voter ID card, and even a gun ID works for you to go vote with. Those are all acceptable forms of IDs. And the polling location, as Catherine has mentioned, will be at the Performing Arts Center. All right, we'll be skipping to Zach Sembrano. Now we will move to the race for San Marcos City Council Place 5. Our first candidate is Mr. Zach Sembrano. Mr. Sembrano is a manager at the San Marcos Outlets. Mr. Sembrano, do you mind if you can introduce yourself?
Yes, CJ. Can you hear me all right? Can you see me all right?
Perfect.
All right, cool. All right. Yes, hello everyone. My name is Zach Sembrano and I'm running for San Marcos City Council Place 5. I am a San Marcos native, so I was born and raised here, and I still live here. I went to all the SMCISD schools, And I went to Texas State. I graduated in 2017 with a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science with a minor in business. And I kind of want to just introduce myself from the stance of me being a student. So while I was in high school, my older brother was in college, and I had many friends that went to San Marcos High School and then went to Texas State. And so kind of keeping in contact with them, I realized how unaffordable college was if you didn't have a savings plan, the realities of unaffordable housing here in town if you didn't have a good paying job, and just transportation and everything in between. So I started working, I actually worked like 3 to 4 jobs. I worked over 55 hours a week from freshman year till my senior year, because I actually had a personal goal of graduating debt free from college. And so it was super tough. I mean, I had a lot of long nights. I would get 2 to 4 hours of sleep, but I was very dedicated to achieve my goal of graduating debt-free, in which I did, and I'm proud to say. I also had graduated with honors. I made Dean's List every single semester, so I kind of want that to kind of play into my work ethic. I know a lot of people see that I'm young and they feel like I'm not ready, but I worked super hard. I was very dedicated. I have a very strong work ethic. And when I set my mind to something, I definitely keep to it. And that's kind of I know it's kind of lead into another question, but that's kind of what experience and characteristic that I plan to bring to council. I also am running just to be able to represent not only the locals, but also students. There's a very disconnect here in the community, and so many locals here think that students are bad. And so many local people know me because my family roots have been here for 4 generations. So many people know me as I've been active, not only at the university, but also in the community. And so when someone says something like, well, we don't want the students in our neighborhoods, I like to put myself in that situation and say, so you wouldn't want me as your neighbor? And so there's just been a lot of issues, from the national rhetoric to why I'm running, to the local rhetoric, as far as there not being affordable housing, there needing to be a stronger stance on criminal justice reform, increased transportation, not only for locals, but for students as well, that don't bring cars to the, to the university, and then aren't able to work if they don't have, jobs around their apartments, and everything of that nature. So that's a little bit about myself.
All right, so the first question is, what are your priorities in seeking office, and what experiences / characteristics make you the best candidate for this office?
Yeah, so kind of going off of my intro, obviously I'm young, so I can't say I have a ton of experience, but I'm kind of approaching this from a stance of, okay, I'm young, but I'm also fresh to this scene. And so I'm going to be able to offer a unique perspective. You have so many people that have kind of been grounded in politics here, not only in the local areas, but in state and in national. And as we see more and more, that party politics is continuing to divide us. And I'm so glad that city politics is not partisan. It's a bipartisan race, just because I really believe that we can all work together. It's going to take locals. It's going to take pro-neighborhood people. It's going to take students. Texas State is not going anywhere. We need students to thrive. So many students, shop at our local businesses. They play at the river. They help bring in money through housing and everything of that like. They shop at the outlet malls. So I really want to kind of harp on that, as far as my characteristic of being a local and being a student and being able to bring that perspective to the council. I've always been, regardless of whether it's on the city, state, or national, I've always believed in a government that represents its people. And I truly believe that students, low-income people, don't have a voice here on city council. And so I plan to bring that to the San Marcos City Council. And I hope that if I am elected, if you do vote for me, that you feel comfortable with reaching out to me. I'm a super personable person. I went through many struggles that you're probably going through. There's many issues. I was just only there 3 years ago. There are many issues that I went through that I'm sure you're going through now. And so that's kind of my biggest niche on what experience and characteristics I'm able to bring, in addition to my work ethic and my dedication, and being able to put the work forth needed to bring that to the council and to new policies. My priorities for seeking office are definitely affordable housing. Here in San Marcos, 51% of income earners earn less than $35,000 a year. Yet the median price in 2017 for a single detached home, which San Marcos primarily has, is $258,000. And many of you probably aren't trying to buy a home here, but there are some of you that are going to be coming from El Paso, coming from 956 in the Valley, coming from Houston, coming from West Texas, East Texas, Dallas, DFW area, and even from other states. And some of you are going to realize that San Marcos is a beautiful town. Our community and our culture is just top notch, and you're going to want to make this your home. And so you're going to realize as you graduate, and hopefully you don't have too much debt, but let's be real, many people graduate with massive amounts of debts, which is a national issue. Unfortunately, the city can't do much about that, but I realize that. And so I realize when you're graduating from Texas State or whatever university, even ACC down the road, and you want to live in town and you want to start to build equity and to buy your first house, you're not able to do that because, one, we don't have affordable housing here in town, and we've seen city council not move the needle on affordable housing. We've seen this kind of, again, like I talked about earlier, this kind of scare that if students kind of come in, that it's gonna be bad for neighborhoods, and it's gonna be bad for the environment and things of that like. And I want people to realize that it's not. That when someone's trying to make San Marcos their home, they have a investment inside our community, and they want to build in this community. They want to grow in this community. So we need jobs. And unfortunately, in order to have a home, you need a job. So we also have to bring jobs to the community. So that's kind of more on my growth for San Marcos. But affordable housing, criminal justice reform, we got to keep hitting on criminal justice reform. If some of my opponents are elected, if other candidates are elected in other positions, there may be a reversal on cite and release. And to be frank, I mean, here in San Marcos, we have a lot of people, especially at Texas State, that are frankly arrested for having a joint on them. And when you don't have money for a predatory cash bail system, you're going to sit in that jail. You're not going to be able to attend class. You're going to lose your job if you're not able to go back to work. And you may even lose your apartment if you're not able to pay for it. So I really think cite and release is a good ordinance that the city passed. I think we're really spearheading that for all of Texas. Now we see other cities kind of following our route. So I'm really glad we got that passed. I also want to make sure we pursue a cite and divert plan. So rather than just going straight from, going and seeing a judge for a case, we have like a middleman that says, you know what, if you got pulled over for driving with an invalid license, let's go ahead and help you find the resources to get this solved. If you get pulled over for having a joint on your person, in your car, whatever the case may be, that you're not going to go sit in jail for all of this time because you can't afford cash bail or you don't have representation or anything of that like. And so besides affordable housing and in criminal justice reform, I also want to touch on protecting the environment. I've always lived here. I know so many people that love the river. We got to make sure we preserve it. We got to make sure we have transportations not only for locals, but for also students. And San Marcos is kind of taking a partnership to partnering with the tram system here at Texas State, which is really good. And then also just environmental protections. So yeah, I know I got a lot of priorities, but I really care.
All right, on to the next question. What is your stance on arresting protesters through local and state law enforcement? What constitutes as an arrestable offense during protesting?
Yeah, so I know Dr. Mahakanen kind of touched on this earlier, and we've had some BLM protests here in town at the old courthouse downtown, which I attended a few of them, and they were peaceful. Everything went well. We walked around downtown areas and everything was good. So we kind of can look at Austin. I know a lot of y'all will probably know what went on in Austin and around the nation, to be frank. I'm glad it hasn't got as bad here as it has nationally, but we've seen law enforcement just take measures that just are uncalled for when protesters are being peaceful. And so I'm definitely from the side of pro-protesters, in that I don't believe if everyone is being lawful and they're being, non-destructive to any kind of property, then there should be no means for arrest. There should be no means for tear gassing. There should be no means for rubber bullets being shot at people. It's sad. It is so sad that you have to see GoFundMes for people that got shot, half their face shot off, or a section of their body shot off because of rubber bullets for something when they were just peacefully protesting and making their voices heard. And I know so many people, whatever side you may be, it is your right. I don't care if you're right or left. Again, this isn't a right or left issue. It is your right to make your voice heard, and you have a peaceful right to assemble. So I want to make sure that everyone kind of understands that and realizes that and understands my stance on it.
All right, let's get to the next question. What is your view of immigration, and what local policies will you pursue that address the needs of immigrant groups?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually, while at Texas State, I helped recharter an organization called LULAC, which stands for League of United Latin American Citizens. It had kind of died off, and I actually started the first ever chapter at San Marcos High School. So of course, when I went to Texas State, because I've already gotten involved, I was a state board member while I was in the youth in San Marcos High School. Of course, I wanted to continue it at Texas State. So I rechartered that. We had a small but strong organization there at Texas State, and it was in doing work with LULAC that I really opened my eyes to immigrants and the needs of immigrants. Although I am Latinx, I've never had to face the reality of deportation or even the fear of it. I've never had to fear for if I was driving and I looked a certain way or my skin was a certain color, that if I was arrested because I simply didn't have papers, even if I lived here all my life, if I simply did not have papers, that I could face a threat of being deported or separated from my family and things of that nature. So what I always like to kind of tell people is really try to put yourself in that person's shoes, especially for Daca recipients. There may be some of you watching right now. If you look, I mean, if you're in person, if you look to your left or to your right, there may be someone who is undocumented sitting next to you right now. And what you don't realize is some of these people have been here literally since infants. This is their home. This is the only country they've ever known. And this is where they deserve to live, and they deserve a right to peacefully be here and not face the threats of deportation. So I'm definitely for immigration. Unfortunately, I kind of, as other people have said, there isn't much that the city can do, but there are avenues that we can kind of look towards and process that helps deter fears of undocumented people facing deportations here in town. So part of cite and release is that, say if someone who's undocumented doesn't have a valid ID, right? That these people, rather than getting arrested and going to jail, and then when they were at the jail, they're going to get processed and booked, and then they're going to realize that, the system's going to realize, okay, you're not documented. You then can face ICE being called and then getting deported. So things like cite and release are very good, cite and divert, because it's going to help the undocumented people stay out of the legal system and make sure that they're safe and that they feel like they don't have to fear every single day about waking up and possible deportation. So although we can't do much on the city level, I'm definitely an advocate for immigration. As we see, our president has not paid much in taxes, and I want people to know that some undocumented people pay more taxes than our current president, in which some of those undocumented people will never receive the benefits from. So if that says anything, let it speak for itself.
All right, let's get to the last question. How do you envision the growth of San Marcos?
Yeah, so kind of, summing up everything kind of I've said into one question would be this, is that we have to develop in a smart way. Like I said, as I've kind of jumped into this local politics, I realized that there's, pro growth and then there's anti-growth, and then the two can't seem to work together. And I've always been someone that likes to hear both sides of the spectrum to try to come to the middle and kind of come to some kind of consensus. And so I believe that we don't have to be completely anti-growth, and growing is not going to be bad for the community. I also believe that we don't need to grow in the sense that we have these huge high rises and developments in and around neighborhoods that displaces people and causes gentrification and causes harmful effects on the environment. And so I believe that we can kind of come together and actually grow. And this is going to take multiple people at the table partnering together, from all ends of the spectrum: environmentalists, developers, students. Students have a big part in this community too. They're vested here, and pro-neighborhood people, and all of this together, and we can responsibly and strategically grow. This is going to mean that we're going to have to sit down and develop a code that's going to include everyone, and here's everyone, and then strategically grows, so that when we place things and when we have zonings saying, you know, apartment housing can only go here, that we make sure that it's in the right area, that it's not going to displace people, it's not going to affect the environment, but it also is going to allow students to walk to school. It's going to reduce fuel emissions. It's going to let them access public transportation, and things of that nature. So we have to make sure that we just have a partnership with everyone. I believe the Chamber of Commerce, this Greater San Marcos Partnership, and many other small, the Downtown Association, Main Street, all these associations that are, you know, for business and attracting wealth and living wage jobs with benefits. We have to make sure that we just all partner together so that when we do grow, because to be frank, for those that don't want growth or like growth is inevitable. Texas State continues to grow. San Marcos continues to grow. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the state and in the nation. So growth is inevitable. So I just truly believe that we have to be smart and strategic with our growth. And I think having everyone at the table will lead to smart growth.
All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mr. Sombrano.
Yes, thank you so much. Vote Zach Sombrano, San Marcos City Council, Place 5.
All right, next we have a former council member, Shane Scott. He is running for San Marcos City Council, Place 4. Mr. Scott was previously a council member from 2010 to 2015. Mr. Scott is a small business owner. Mr. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, good, finally. Sorry, guys. Missed you on the last one. I'm Shane Scott. Basically, as you said, I was a city council before for 5 years, during a time when San Marcos actually had the most growth it's had in decades. And that was because I was a student here. I went to school here, graduated with a criminal justice degree, and never left. I've made this my home, raised my kids here. But you couldn't, you know, make a living here. You had to go like from San Antonio to Austin. You know, I had to run my company in Austin. And one of my goals was basically to make sure that changed when I first got on city council. I was a single dad at the time, and raised my daughter through the school system here. She graduated valedictorian. So it's a great place. It's a great place for the community, and it's a great college. I loved it.
All right, let's get to your first question. What are your priorities in seeking this office? What experience or characteristics make you the best candidate for this office?
I have a lot more experience in business. I'm a small business owner. I have a lot more experience in just in general. Basically, I do many different things. I'm a filmmaker, you know, I do a lot of different things, but being the fact that I understand the whole situation where San Marcos was and where it's going and how it got there is critical. And I understand that more than my opponent for sure. Mr. Rockmore's a nice guy and we get along just fine, but I do have way more experience, especially when it comes to budgets and how you allocate funds, and you know, how everybody has this pie in the sky idea what they're going to do, but when they get there, they realize you really can't do anything that you thought you can do, and here's what you can do. And I do have those realities already set in to make really, you know, progressive changes, if there are going to be any changes that are even available to us. Because again, as you heard from several different people, or this federal or state, you know, municipalities are really, you know, not as powerful as election people make them seem to be. They're just not. Our job is to worry about your safety, you know, water, sewer, and that's pretty much what the job of a city council person is. You know, they go above and beyond, you know, on these national level stuff, but the reality is I want to focus on our community, our students,
All right.
So, it says my connection is unstable or something.
Okay. All right. Let's jump to the next question. How might you see local government assisting communities during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, the best way we as a community can help is working to help each other by using resources within our own community to try to help other small businesses. Some of the things I've offered in this time frame, I have an automotive shop. I told you I have a business here in town, and I've been trying to help people who, especially like single mothers and stuff like that can't afford, extra car repairs and stuff like that. I've been doing a lot of free service in that regard. But if everybody would take some type of initiative like that, either volunteering for the food bank or, just knowing to get the services within our community, that'll help our small businesses grow. Beyond that, we're going to have to look out beyond, our town into the federal side of things. That's where I actually have experience in bringing federal funds into the town, which we've done many times, and how to get that distributed amongst the people in the right way so that, it helps us as a community. And then pray, obviously, that the pandemic ends and we find a cure for it as well. I think the pandemic, I believe, has helped us come closer together in many ways and let us know kind of what is more important in our lives and our families and our community. And that's what the biggest, issue is right now, is making sure we support each other.
All right. What kinds of criminal justice reforms, including incarceration and law enforcement, would you support for addressing racial inequalities?
Well, my degree is in criminal justice, and racial inequalities is probably, well, not just inequalities, but just the mindset of how a kind of a paramilitary system is set up. I wasn't able to join the police, even though my degree was following that, because I just didn't feel I fit the mold. Because I have a lot more leniency towards things. But one thing I do know is the police officers that we have here in San Marcos are fantastic. And they, for years, have tried to lessen their workload just by creating their own cite and release within before that even happened. If you were pulled over for a marijuana, cigarette, or alcohol, that stuff was just dumped out, and you weren't given a ticket. You were getting a warning, or you actually have to do something that would require them to have to do paperwork, and they've kind of lived that principle a long time here in San Marcos. That's why when somebody had mentioned, the Rocky Mountain had mentioned the riots and stuff like, our riots are working in San Marcos, but the protests here, there wasn't any police officers. There were, but again, nothing was happening that they would jump out to, intersect with it. So the criminal justice, as far as cite and release, I think it's up to the police officer. I think the police officer should make the discretion. Police officers get continual training every year. They're, have continued training. They have stuff they have to keep up with all the time. And we've had a rude awakening to a couple bad apples, and it's good that we're all bringing them out. And that makes the police department within themselves want to change. They do not want to have a bad example. They don't want to have a bad arrest. They don't want to look, like they're not doing their job correctly by arresting somebody that's just going to get off. It just doesn't make sense for them.
All right, on to the next question. What is your stance on arresting protesters through local and state law enforcement? What constitutes as an arrestable offense during protesting?
Safety and violence. That's pretty much it. If you're screaming, yelling, having a good time, and making your point, that's not an arrestable offense. You have to put somebody in danger. You have to create damage, property damage. I think that's going to be universal across the board, I would imagine.
Okay, on to the next question. What are your plans to address and mitigate the effects of climate change?
Well, that's actually really important to me. I'm a huge recycling person, and when I was on council, that was one of the things that had came up, what the best companies we could use to create a recycle program. And we happened to hire one of the greatest people in the world that was able to put that together, and like we have like zero waste situations. I mean, they just improve on it all the time. So that's something I'm very proud of. And, you know, obviously part of doing the river cleanups and, you know, I like walkability. I really like the idea of having people that commute, you know, from the north or the south, trying to get them off the streets. One of the ideas and I want to push is to have a parking bus station at north of town and south of town, and have the buses bringing it in, get less traffic off the streets, promote more walkability, you know, scooters or whatever. I like electric. So anything that reduces our carbon imprint is something that I've, you know, a big, you know, component of.
All right. For the next question, many students are working and/or will be entering the job market. What strategies do you plan for economic growth during the COVID era?
The same things that I did when there wasn't COVID, being a business-friendly community. Basically, the GSMP was a partnership group that our team, our council at the time, voted in and got moving. That's what brought us like Amazon Prime, that was on council, not Prime, but Amazon. And then at Epic Pipe and all these other real big, good jobs allow people to make a, you know, livable wage. So that has to be our target. And one of the problems with the investors, when I talk to them, they don't want to invest in a town that has unbalanced government. And right now they feel like it's not stable enough to invest and bring jobs. Matter of fact, we have lost jobs and they've moved to other towns around us. We lost 95 jobs. I know of not too long ago that we would have had, you know, if they would have felt more comfortable with balance in our city government. And hopefully that's what I'm bringing back as a business person, because there's nobody there with that perspective. And we did really well, like I said, in those 5 years. This is the best growth we've had ever. And that's what I want for the students, because that's what I didn't have when I was here. I want to be able to live, work, and play here, you know, and just not have to go 40 miles south and north to get anything. You know, they allow us to have a good time here and enjoy our lives here without being on the road all the time.
All right. What is your view on immigration, and what local policies will you pursue that address the needs of immigrant groups?
Well, actually, I'm first generation immigrant. My mom's from Chile, South America. I just look kind of a little lighter than my mom does, but I basically am, it's like baseball. If you slide into home plate and you touch the base, you're safe, you know. And I think that if you're here and you didn't necessarily get here legally, that you should have the opportunity to be a citizen of the United States. I think that's real important, and I've always been a supporter of that. Some of course, you've heard earlier that a lot of the programs are things that we can't do in general, but what we can do is support what we do have in our community. We're working with our churches and working with care groups to help people in these needs. You know, I mean, starting, you know, the Goodwills are real important. A lot of the, you know, people that are afraid of, you know, law enforcement and stuff like that, you know, will tend to be on the outer skirts of town. And I would hope that we could do more things to, you know, make them feel welcome. And I know, like on the law enforcement side of it, that's the last thing a police officer thinks about is what, you know, arresting somebody that doesn't have an, you know, basically a U.S. citizenship. The arrest that you see of police officers is when there's serious crimes involved and they are a threat to the community. But I talk to police officers all the time about that. And they're like, no, you're safe. You know, you made it. Good luck. So I think that keeping that, you know, mentality and finding ways to help others as we're supposed to is probably our best way to try to help the people that come to our community and want to stay.
What housing protections measures would you support for students?
As a student, I remember, you know, 3 roommates, splitting the rent, rooms the size of closets, you know. No, I never had any issue with it, but I found out later on as the community, everything started to grow, that a lot of students were having these landlords that were keeping their deposits and not being fair. I'm a huge advocate of making sure you're treated really fairly, and to make sure that all of the rental agencies that rent your students, I would love to take away the ability to file any type of credit issue, with students that perhaps were kicked out of school, or perhaps just school wasn't for them, and they get into these leases and stuff like that. I really believe they should be able to terminate the lease. They should be able to terminate the lease if they're not happy there. They should be able to terminate the lease. I think those are rights that really need to be looked into in the community, especially in apartments, because that's basically, where most students are now. So I really think that your time here and the enjoyment of your time here needs to be quality. Focus on your schooling, be a good, character in our community. And, if you're happy and like it, stay, find a job you enjoy.
So for the last question, how do you envision the growth of San Marcos?
Well, I envision the growth. It's obviously already here, but I'm actually looking to more towards how can we protect the city from growth that can change the dynamics of our community altogether. One of the ideas and proposals that I've had is to create a loop, which we have half of a loop already around San Marcos. I'd like to finish the other half of the loop so that we kind of have our boundaries. And again, those parking garages north and south, getting less people off the streets. Because if anybody has ever noticed I-35, anybody gets a fender bender, it just shuts down. So for us to get around as a community, that would take care of us. And the way I would do that is, since we have environmentally sensitive areas on the hill country side, which is actually to our benefit, federal funding would probably be able to pay for the other half around the loop, which I'm all about, and making sure that we preserve it and we're, for our environment down there. And that's, matter of fact, it'd probably be above, one of the carrier freeways above on Post, and then the ground would probably be, just natural parkland, which I really like. That's just one of the many goals, but they're pretty broad.
All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mr. Scott.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Next, we will have Mr. Omar Baca. Mr. Baca is running for San Marcos City Council Place 5. He is a former Travis and Williamson County firefighter. Thank you, Mr. Baca, for joining us for this for our evening virtual town hall. Would you like to introduce yourself? Mr. Baca, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Okay, that was an embarrassing moment. So my name is Omar Baca. I'm running for San Marcos City Council, place number 5. You met my opponent, Zach Zambrano. He's a wildly talented young man, and I enjoy going to these forums with him because we're very similar and very close to being aligned in a lot of philosophical ways. And I think there's a couple points that we differ in, but I think he's a joy, and I think he's a talent that will be reckoned with for years to come in San Marcos, and hopefully he stays in this space. Oh, and about myself, like he said, I was a Travis County and Williamson County firefighter. I was EMS provider of the year in both Williamson County and Travis County. I was a firefighter of the year in Williamson County, and I was also the recipient of a Medal of Valor. Healthcare is being part of healthcare. That was the part that I loved the most because it filled my spiritual bucket. And I came to San Marcos and I worked at Central Texas Medical Center, and there I was the patient advocate. And I worked in the ER so I could get my clinical side stuff done, but I was the patient advocate, arranging and bringing people together in a very confusing place that is the world of healthcare. So I was a solution maker. And I think that's one of my God-given skill sets that I just came by naturally, is that kind negotiator, that people will tell their most grave and intimate secrets to me to kind of release to me. Anyway, I've spent 2,500 hours of volunteerism here in Hayes County since we've been here. I have a family of 7. I have 4 children and a set of twins in there, and a boy and a girl, and my lovely wife Heather, whose picture is, when I'm not on the video, her picture's there, and she's much nicer to look at than myself. And we take care of my mother, and I am her full-time caregiver, and she's an Alzheimer's dementia patient. And that's a lot. That was as much as I could get in a short amount of time.
All right. First question. What are your priorities in seeking office? What experience or characteristics make you the best candidate for this office?
Okay. Well, I wish that was the ending statement, but we'll start with that one. This place 5 is a special election, and it was originally going to be placed in May. And so I started running in March, and it got postponed because of COVID now until November. And if we go into runoff, because there's 3 people, that goes into December. And then so I'll have from December to March until I have to start running again for the next piece of the term. So it may very well be less than a year's term. And so what I want to establish in that short of a time is I want to bring a reputation of being the hardest working council person. And that's saying a lot, because there's a few people on council that are very diligent, they're very dedicated, and very well studied. I admire them, and I want to mimic, match, and hopefully surpass that with a future of work ethic. I want to be available. I want to be approachable, and I want to be as transparent as possible. And I know this is we live in a world of trolls and negativity, and you're attacked every day, and all of those things. But I think I'm a relentless optimist. Long-term goals. I am like I said, I come from fire and EMS, and I have a decorated and loving of emergency services, period. What I'd like to leave San Marcos with, if I'm afforded the ability, if I'm blessed with the ability to become a city council person, is to leave a legacy of bringing San Marcos premier emergency service departments. I think we have okay departments, and I don't think we have anybody on council currently that has an understanding of what, when fire and EMS and law enforcement come to them and say, hey, these are our stats, this is what we're doing. I see a lot of like, great, wonderful, pretty trucks, nice cars. And they don't understand the numbers that are going for them. For instance, fire, whose chief I love, I think he's a great fellow, but their average response time is, I believe, 11 minutes and 42 seconds. The ISO rating, which is the insurance rating, which is results that impacts, it's a secret tax because it impacts taxpayers on the insurance side. But our average response time has actually gotten worse over the last 3 years. And, you know, the town is growing. And so managing those things is naturally going to be challenging and be stretched out. But instead of heading in a direction of neutralizing it or improving it, we're actually heading away from those metrics. And so I want to tell you that 11 minutes and 42 seconds is I don't know if you know how many minutes it takes for a house to burn down. That's 8 minutes. So, and that's a regular structure fire, is 8 minutes until fire gets there and they go defensive. So by the time San Marcos Fire on average gets to your location, they have to go defensive on your fire, which means fighting it from the outside and pouring water from the outside versus an interior attack to be able to retrieve souls that might be in danger. So 85% of that job is EMS. And so our fire department really doesn't engage that much in EMS and roll with EMS that much. And I would like to change that. I think there's a masking effect in the fact that we have healthcare so close by. We have 2 hospitals like bang, bang right there. So the transport time for EMS is super short. So it makes up for the longer extended response times. And I think that's a masking thing. And I think we need to ask San Marcos Fire and our law enforcement to raise to a level. I would love to see them raise to a level of being able to be a premier department, because we're strategically in a hub. San Antonio, Austin, Houston, the Hill Country, all of those things are around us. I would love for these departments to be hubs of training and excellence, that people, award-winning departments, that people would come here and dump their tourism dollars in here, because we have the best emergency services, period, bar none. So I think that's a piece of legacy I could leave because of my experience. And that is just one of the many things that I prey upon if I'm afforded the ability to do that job.
All right, so here's on to the next question. Many students are working and will be entering the job market. What strategies do you plan on for economic growth during this COVID era?
During the COVID era? Can you say that last part one more time? I'm sorry.
Oh yes, during the COVID era.
Okay, so with students, I think COVID has exposed the fact that we're very one-sided in our economy. We're heavily dependent on service and retail, and we don't have a lot to offer in other ways. I think that a partnership with the university is important. I think and when I say we, I say Texas State and us, because that ownership there, we produced the best physical therapists, period. Being a healthcare person, Texas State PTs are the absolute best. And we have people come from outside and in, they don't compare. We produce amazing teachers. We're also producing great nurses, but they're in Round Rock and Pflugerville. And so we need to partnership with bringing things like that home, or taking other aspects like technology or other things of that nature and working those aspects here, because it brings a job market here. I'm going to tell you why I said physical therapist, because of my background in the hospital, I know that this space is talent rich. People come from all over the United States to come to school here for physical therapy, and they stay because they fall in love with this town. I fell in love with this town. You fell in love with this town. We want to stay here. And so we have talent-rich space with all these physical therapists and educators and all of those other things that Texas State produces that are talent-heavy, and we don't have an outlet for them. So that is big picture. But as far as COVID, I think finding alternative ways for businesses to do business and bring back some of their roles of employment, but also gaining back some of their bottom line as well, and seeking new and smart, innovative ways to achieve those things is part of what council should be doing. I know that Shane Scott said that there's a box that we live in. We should only do those things, and that is, I understand that kind of libertarian-esque kind of mindset. I understand it. However, when you get to a point where you're with embracing COVID, you have to have city council people that are going to give a bad word more than that little box. And it's going to take time to innovate and go out, make relationships with the university, make relationships with the small businesses that are beyond that small box. And that is what I hope to be as a council person. And above and beyond, I think my favorite hashtag is so extra, because that's myself personally, but it's going to take innovators to deal with crisis like this, to build relationships with Texas State, and to be able to help our talent be successful. So.
All right, so for the next question, what kinds of criminal justice reforms, including incarceration and law enforcement, would you suggest for addressing racial inequalities?
That is a giant question. I think that well, let me get to the first part of that question, and it was the criminal justice reform. There's modern era of policing. We just passed the criminal justice reform in San Marcos that I'm very proud of, and it passed 4-3, I believe, barely. And one of my other opponents, I believe, has promised to, if he gets on council, to bring it back, to take it away, to eliminate it. And I very much am in support of it because other cities are actually starting to look at us and they're calling it the San Marcos model. And that is something that to be proud of in the fact that we're innovating something, but we've got to collect the data and be able to prove that what we're doing is good and right. I believe it is. I believe it is so. I think that I'm not a marijuana user myself. As a child, I signed the Nancy Reagan contract in the 4th grade, and I held true to that content all the way till today. But I think that marijuana is foolish to criminalize in any form or facet. I think it's a waste of time. And I think that other states have made us look silly in the fact that they're able to bear tax from it and provide relief for people fiscally. But also you have a ton of people that, because of our healthcare system the way it is, people are self-medicating with marijuana. Carpenters with a broken back, a busted hand, people with PTSD, all of those other things, people are self-medicating and self-dosing themselves. And you know, if you go to the Travis County and Hayes County line back there, if you cross the border from one county to the other, in one you're going to wind up in jail, and you're going to have an extended process. Your due process is super slow in Hayes County. In the other, in Travis County, it's not even criminalized. It's a waste of their time. Don't waste my time with this. Okay, cool, whatever. Get out of here. And so here in Hayes County, as city council, a big portion of that is encouraging a relationship with the sheriff's race. We have a sheriff's race going on right now, and the aspect of those two sheriff's candidates are polar. One is the incumbent, and it's to stay criminalizing marijuana, and the other one is a completely different aspect. And so however that race turns out is going to be the theme and the tone of criminal justice, because the county level has a big deal to do with that, because they're the jail and they take that due process on afterwards. And I'm going to tell you, people are looking to make money off of Texas State students. There's bond companies, and there's attorneys and everything else that are built to make money off of Texas State students, and there's a percentage of that. And if we decriminalize, the people who are going to be fighting those things are going to be the people that are it's going to affect their pocketbook. And that's understandable that they're going to resist. But I think that we find new forms of businesses to a rotation in business, to new form of business to not prey upon Texas State students or the other citizens, period. So I am for criminal justice reform. I think that as a firefighter, the comparison is that we're called firefighters. We don't fight that many fires. Those big red trucks with the axes and the hoses and all that good stuff, 85% of our job is EMS, but we're still called firefighters. They allow us to keep that name because it's, yeah, I'm a firefighter. The real nomenclature is paramedic helper, the helper guy. Like I go stretch, get the stretcher for you and help you lift a patient. So that was a culture change, and it was a huge point of resistance in the fire service, that EMS was part of our lives, and it was a rotation. And I think law enforcement is going to see the same rotation to evolve to meet the needs of the citizens. And I know that right now we're super polarized, and I know that, there's a lot of, everybody has a flag with a stripe on it. And if you have the wrong one, we're so polarized, and that's, I hope to bring a middle ground between those because of my experience and because I come from a place of an emergency responder, that I can make those communications and hopefully shed light on the fact that a rotation for our department is a good thing, and it helps them advance and grow professionally.
All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mr. Baca.
Was that it? Did I finish did I talk too much?
That's it for tonight.
Okay.
We will now move on to the mayor race in San Marcos. We have a recording of an interview with incumbent Mayor Jane Hewson, and Catherine. Mayor Hewson previously retired from Texas State in 2015. Let's cue the video.
All right, there you go. Hello, Mayor Hewson. I'm going to go ahead and start with asking you to introduce yourself before we ask any of the questions.
Certainly. My name is Jane Hewson. I am your current mayor, and I'm seeking re-election. The mayor position in San Marcos is a 2-year term, so I'm seeking your vote and your support for another 2 years. I have over 30 years of experience on multiple city boards and commissions, including Planning and Zoning Commission, Ethics Review Commission, 2 comprehensive plan committees, and the Emergency Medical Services Board. And I'm also a graduate of the city's Citizen Police and Fire Academy, so I have some understanding of how those departments work. Currently, I'm on several regional boards, and I chair the Capital Area Council of Governments 10 County Board of Directors. I'm past president of 5 local nonprofit organizations. And as we know, San Marcos is a university town. I'm not only a graduate of Texas State University, I worked there for 33 years, so I'm familiar with issues that arise for students.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Your first question is, what are your priorities in seeking or holding office? What experience and or characteristics might make you the best candidate for this office?
Okay. I already responded to the experience and characteristics with my introduction, but my priority as mayor and always as a council member, which I served for 10 years prior to being mayor, is to make San Marcos better for all residents. I'm noting that many of us are low to moderate income, so we need to keep that in mind, but better through our land development code, strategic priorities set by the city council, and programs that we have to offer, such as $500,000 granted each year to a number of nonprofit and social service agencies, such as the Hayes Caldwell Women's Center and the Hayes County Food Bank.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me ask your next question. What is your stance on arresting protesters through local and state law enforcement? What constitutes an arrestable offense during a protest, in your opinion?
Okay. In San Marcos, when protest organizers contact our local police department while planning the event, they will find excellent guidance and assistance as to how to have a successful protest. The PD will instruct as to areas in which to best congregate and areas to avoid, like streets, and generally assist for a successful, which is a peaceful protest. You'll note that our police do not show up in riot gear. They're there to be helpful. I suspect we could take a different stance if needed, but it hasn't been, probably because we don't, and we tend to work with people up front. Our police are not like those you read in some of the headlines. This is on purpose, and I appreciate them for what they do. Generally, I'm going to leave it up to the police to determine what is an arrestable offense, but I'm sure that it is what somebody would be arrested for anyway. Halting traffic, or worse, standing in front of traffic and being a danger to themselves. So anyway, I leave that to them, but I think as long as people are protesting peacefully, there should not be a problem. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. How might you see federal, state, and or local government assisting communities during the COVID-19 pandemic? Please respond to the office you are seeking.
Okay. The city of San Marcos has done a great deal in this area. Almost immediately after the disaster declaration, the city, along with our Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development partners, posted web pages on each site with resources for people and businesses. City personnel have helped with testing, which is a responsibility of the county, and we provided federal money of over $100,000 to help with testing. We stopped utility disconnects for non-payment and provided means to assist residents with their utility bills. Many city services went online, but we also allowed people to select and pick up books at the library's front door, and we made other provisions for people to continue services. We also provided almost $200,000 of federal funds for businesses, which is administered by our Chamber of Commerce in that partnership. We've required landlords to provide a notice to tenants that they have a right to cure a delinquency within 90 days before having to move out. And for businesses, we approved adjustments to permit inspection fees for food establishments. We assisted them in inspections so when the restaurants could reopen, they could reopen them as soon as the governor lifted the ban. They didn't have to wait and then call for an inspection and be delayed by a few days. We also provided almost $100,000 from City CARES funds for the purchase of technology devices for K through 12 students. And then there are some smaller things that we did that are still important, such as approving 10-minute parking spaces downtown for businesses who went online and customers choose to come in and pick up the items as opposed to having them mailed. And we still have funds coming from the federal government. We're looking at what the criteria is for how we can spend that money. And so we continue to do that for pretty close to $3 million that we will need to spend by the end of December.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Your next question is, many students are working and or entering the job market. What are your strategies do you have when to plan for economic growth during the COVID-19 era?
Well, the governor has made it clear that he's in charge of which types of businesses open and when, and the rules under which they may open. So we have to follow those guidelines. But we will continue our economic development program, which has been jobs-based, which means we do not provide incentives for jobs that are not at least $15 an hour. We will be hearing about 2 more potential companies tomorrow night, but note that a lot of companies come here and never ask us for any incentives. They simply come in, meet all the requirements, and then they open. So we don't always know about all of those until they choose to open their doors. But the money that we're providing through the Chamber of Commerce is to help businesses reopen. And when businesses reopen, that means they can hire employees. So that is where we hope that a lot of people will be able to go back to work.
Thank you so much for answering that. What is your view of immigration and what policies will you pursue related to changes in the current immigration policy? What is your position on Daca?
This is really not a city issue, except to say that our police are not seeking out illegal immigrants when no crime has been committed. We know that everyone needs to trust our police so that crimes will be reported by anyone who needs to report a crime, regardless of their immigration status. We did take exception to Senate Bill 4 that was passed by our state legislature a few years ago. There were some major issues with that. And did you ask me about Daca?
Yes, that was something students were asking about.
Okay. I have no city position on Daca, but personally, I will say that I would like to see that young people in that situation are not deported, can feel safe in America with a path to citizenship.
All right, thank you so much. Your final question is, what housing protection measures would you support for students?
I am so glad you asked this question. In 2017, we implemented mandatory alternatives for students who encounter the unpleasant fact that their home will not be ready on the promised move-in date. Students may have heard the horror stories that have happened when student housing is not finished construction on their move-in date. When I heard about the problem, I asked the City Council to appoint a committee to look into it. We did. We made a recommendation to the Council, which passed 7-0. And the result was a new ordinance that includes, and I'm going to read this, if your unit is not ready on the date promised, the landlord must offer you temporary housing at no cost to you, or you may opt out of the lease with no financial penalty, and a full refund must be issued within 10 days. Note that there are still some student housing projects in the pipeline for which this will not apply, but we've used this for a couple so far, which has been good. In addition, shortly after, we passed an ordinance that requires a notice to any tenant if they're living in a special flood hazard area. That means when you sign your lease, you are given a notice that you are in a special flood hazard area. You may choose to get a different type of insurance for renter's insurance, but at least you will have the information to make that decision. I also highly recommend that everyone sign up at warncentraltexas.org, and this is to get alerts so that when it's raining hard outside, if it looks like there's going to be flooding conditions, then you will know what to do and you will know when to do it. Your unit may be fine, the roadway out might be flooded. So regardless, I highly recommend signing up for warncentraltexas.org. You can choose to receive a text, a phone call, or an email, or any combination of the three. And also, when I was doing research on this, I found municipalities that have adopted the International Property Maintenance Code, such as Austin and San Marcos, require landlords to provide heating facilities capable of maintaining a room temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And also, we have made arrangements for the Austin Tenants Council to serve people in San Marcos. That number is 512-474-1961. We value students as important members of our community, and so the City Council does not forget about our students when we're looking to see how we can make things better for people in San Marcos.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions for our voter guide for students today. For any student watching this, just a quick reminder, early voting starts October 13th. We will be at the Performing Arts Center this year because of COVID-19. There has been a switch of the location. Mayor Hewson, thank you so much for doing this today. I hope you have a wonderful day.
All right. Also running for mayor, our last candidate of the evening is Mr. Miguel Arredondo. Mr. Arredondo is currently a San Marcos CISD school board trustee. Do you mind introducing yourself first?
Yeah, first, CJ and the election task force, thank you all so much for hosting tonight's town hall. My name is Miguel Arredondo, and like CJ said, I'm running to be your next mayor of San Marcos. I'm a fifth generation San Marcos native. I'm a proud graduate of our local high school and a San Marcos Rattler, and I'm a product of the university's public administration program. And for the past 5 years, I've been a progressive voice on our local ISD school board, championing such causes as free breakfast and lunch for all ISD children, combating food insecurity. We invested heavily in technology prior to the pandemic, so we pivoted fairly quickly and easily in a very changing climate when the public health crisis fell upon us. And more than anything, I'm running because I know that there are large segments of our community who are not represented by our current mayor or city council, and I'm here to amplify their voices and make sure that their needs are finally met.
All right, so for the next question, what are your plans to address and mitigate the effects of climate change?
So if you visit my website, votejma.com, I have a very lengthy platform in regards to environmental sustainability and making sure that we do what we can at a local level to respond to the ongoing climate crisis. First and foremost, we can make sure that as a community we develop responsibly, and that means promoting practices that prevent urban sprawl, having people on the roads driving throughout the day, having a proficient mass transportation system, making sure that people can walk and bike and that our streets are safe for those who choose to be pedestrians. And really it's thinking globally by acting locally. And that means adopting progressive policies and programs and green initiatives at a local level that maybe be expensive or may require substantial investment, but as someone who grew up in our neighborhoods and who learned how to swim in our San Marcos River, that is one of our greatest natural assets, and we have to do what we can to protect it here in San Marcos.
All right, so for the next question, how might you see local government assisting communities during the COVID-19 pandemic?
So I'm going to have to disagree with the incumbent mayor in regards to the city having some type of an elaborate response to the public health crisis. We see communities like the city of Austin and the city of San Antonio not only providing rental assistance and mortgage assistance to families who have been impacted, or even students who have been impacted by the economic effects of the pandemic, but we've seen the city of San Antonio and Austin similarly providing workforce training or job retraining for those who were in fields that are just no longer sustainable in the current public health crisis. So those are several examples of where the city, in my opinion, has fallen short, and to this day continues to fall short. We are sitting on more than $8 million in CARES Act funding locally that we haven't spent that could be going to these initiatives and these programs. Similarly, we have significant financial reserves on the city of San Marcos side that could go to things like rental assistance for students, for community members. And so, I mean, there are so many things that we could be doing, but for the incumbent mayor to say, well, we distributed federal funds that were coming to us anyway, again, I think just shows that she, unlike many of us, lives on a $1.3 million estate in San Marcos, and the average family of four makes less than $35,000 a year. So I think she's a little removed from the current economic and public health crisis.
All right, so on to the next question. What kinds of criminal justice reforms, including incarceration and law enforcement, would you suggest for addressing racial inequalities?
So unlike Mayor Hewson, I do support the cite and release ordinance as approved by this current city council. She did vote against it, and I think that is a clear distinction that we should make during tonight's town hall, and that there is a very real possibility that if several candidates currently running are elected in November, that they will undo the cite and release ordinance. So not only do we have to protect that ordinance and make sure that it stays law in our community, but it's having a very sincere and in some instances a very difficult conversation about what policing looks like in our community and whether or not police should respond to all the issues that they currently respond to. We know things like social services, mental health, addiction, cessation programs are the best way to address so many of the public health crises that we currently have in our community. So really it's moving from this one-size-fits-all police program and mindset that we've currently been conditioned to live in and look at ways of funding other critical social services and lessening our over-reliance on uniformed armed police officers.
Okay, so on to the next question. On a related note, what is your stance on arresting protesters through local and state law enforcement? What constitutes as an arrestable offense during protesting?
So I go back to having to just draw a distinction between myself and our incumbent mayor, in which she says that protesters need to work through the San Marcos Police Department to organize a protest. My question then is, what do protesters do when they are protesting the very organization that they have to apply for permitting or get permission from? So again, I think it shows that she is very detached from these national and even local conversations about what policing looks like. In regards to what is an arrestable offense, I personally stand in solidarity with the folks who are organizing, can continue to organize and advocate that Black lives matter and that we have to do more to reform our criminal justice system. I think that we see time and time again police departments arbitrarily arresting students for things, young people, activists for things that are not arrestable offenses. And we've seen that take place even at Texas State University. And we had no elected officials, including Mayor Hewson, publicly disavow that from occurring. And again, I think it just shows that when these difficult situations arise, our current elected leaders stay silent, and that has to change.
So on to the next question. What is your view of immigration, and what local policies will you pursue that address the needs of immigrant groups?
There are so many examples nationwide and even in Texas of ways that we can invest in social services and in front-facing organizations that are doing the work in the community to empower and protect our undocumented citizens. And that means creating relationships with Texas State University, the San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District, and the City of San Marcos, and leveraging our resources to support the organizations who are on the ground doing the work to empower and advocate and protect these vulnerable populations. It's difficult to say what we can do because right now the City of San Marcos is not doing anything. So just doing a little bit would be an astronomical improvement from the current situation that we are currently living in. Mayor Hewson cited social services, and we fund the food bank. And again, the food bank is a very small niche of what the needs are in the San Marcos community. And so we have to have a very sincere conversation of supporting the social service agencies and the organizations who are doing the work that are obviously needs that are being unmet by the city government and the ISD and Texas State University for that matter.
All right, so on to the next question. Many students are working and or will be entering the job market. What strategies do you have planned for economic growth during this COVID era?
One of the first things that we all realized when the economy shut down was that service industry jobs were the first thing to go. And we know that young people, and not just young people, but most citizens in San Marcos work in these front-facing service industry retail jobs. And it brought up a conversation that we need to have. And it's we need to attract more jobs that pay living wages, 21st century jobs that allow people to work from home. We know who was returning to work during the shutdown: young people and people of color. We saw that nationally and we saw that locally, but in some instances, folks who live on a $1.3 million estate on the nice side of town, like Mayor Hewson, got to stay home. Her supporters who had bankrolled her campaign got to stay home. Latinos, people of color, and young people had to return to work while they stayed home and sheltered in place safely. And so it's talking about the inequities in our community, the inequities in our local economy, and making sure that we create a San Marcos that works for all of us.
Okay, so on to the next question. What are your priorities in seeking this office? What experiences and/or characteristics make you the best candidate for this office?
So if you listen to Mayor Hewson's pre-recorded forum, it sounds like everything is well and good in the city of San Marcos. Meanwhile, folks of Latinx descent and communities of color and young people know that we have an economic crisis. We can't find jobs. We have families who can't pay their mortgage, who can't pay their electric bill. But in Mayor Hewson's eyes, everything is okay, and it's not. So I'm running to respond and address the three crises that are currently facing our San Marcos community: the public health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic effects of the state shutting down earlier this year, and small businesses and families just trying to financially survive, and also the housing affordability crisis that disproportionately impacts communities of color and young people, especially students at Texas State. And any candidate who isn't talking about the inequities and the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic are clearly so detached from reality, because the majority of our citizens are living that experience each and every day. And that's why I'm running to be mayor of San Marcos.
All right, so how do you envision the growth of San Marcos?
I envision a fair and just local economy. I envision a city of San Marcos in which its communities of color are not over-policed, where our students are not blamed, and where Texas State is not blamed for every societal ill that faces the city of San Marcos. And quite frankly, it's interesting that tonight in her pre-recorded video, Mayor Hewson talks about being such a supporter of Texas State when she, through her entire tenure on city council, has bemoaned Texas State and its effects on our housing and the river and students just going to the bars and partying. So I can understand where she forgets that while talking to the university students, but the tapes are there, you can go watch them. So it's a community that truly is representative of all constituencies, in which everyone's needs are met, and that people who are retired and of the top 1% are not making the decisions for folks who are struggling to put food on their tables or to find jobs that pay a living wage. It's a fair and just San Marcos. That is my vision for the future of our community.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Arredondo, for joining us tonight for our virtual town hall.
Thank you so much again, CJ, and the rest of the Elections Task Force for hosting this. It was phenomenal.
In closing out this evening's town hall, we will hear a few thoughts from our voter-friendly campus coordinator, Catherine Whitker. You will recognize her from the video recordings. She will tell you what the voter-friendly campus team has been up to and what the VFC is all about.
Thank you so much, CJ. Good evening, Bobcats. As a fellow Bobcat myself, the voter-friendly campus is something that has held very important to my heart. Since 2018, we have been fighting for a full-time polling location to consistently be on our campus. And now we are ensuring that every student on this campus has the resources to get registered to vote and know what is on their ballot and safely go and vote. We are hosting events like this to educate y'all. We had the Drive Up Voter Registration event on Monday, where we registered over 700 students to vote and community members, because we understand we are part of a larger community. Not only have we done that, we also participated in National Voter Registration Day, where even during the pandemic, over 200 fellow Bobcats came and registered to vote on that one given day. We are here to help assist you leading up till the election. This week is National Voter Education Week, which is why we hosted these forums. And we will be posting things on our Facebook page, Bobcats Vote, where you can ask any questions of such as what you can bring to the polls. Earlier this evening, CJ talked about making sure you have the right identification and not bringing a student ID, because that doesn't work. So we will be updating you on information, and we will have students such as our Campus Vote Project Fellows who are going to be at the polls to assist you with any questions that you might have when going up to vote. We want to make sure that your voting experience is as easy and as fun as possible, because civic engagement is for everyone. And so that is why we are here. I hope that y'all have a wonderful evening and that you're continuing to stay safe during COVID-19. Good night.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for your hard work. She is also a member of the 2020 Elections Task Force, but I would be remiss if I did not thank her on her behalf of the Texas State community. We want to thank our voter-friendly team for all the great work your group is doing during the 2020 election season. I also like to give a special shout out to Evan Bookman from our campus chapter of the NAACP, our veterans at Texas State, College Dems, Young Conservatives, and student government, for all of the work you have done to get students registered at Texas State. At this time, I will turn the program over to Dr. Ben for our closing remarks.
All right, thank you so much, CJ. So I'm going to wrap up really quickly because we have gone over our program about 12 minutes. However, it was a great program, very educational, really important for us to understand how significant it is for us to know what local issues are and how those issues will impact us, and how candidates perceive and what their perspectives are, on those specific issues. So at this time, what I'm going to do is just thank our sponsoring groups who have helped us to coordinate this event this evening. So CJ mentioned several of those. So I want to thank our Young Conservatives, College Democrats, the School of Social Work, the Department of Philosophy, and of course our voter-friendly campus team. I also want to thank CJ for serving as our moderator. He did a fine job, and so thank you so much, CJ, for all of the hard work that you put in. Our town halls have been recorded, both of our town halls, the first one which focused on state and congressional candidates, and our local town hall, which has been this evening. We've recorded these particular events because we want to make them available to our campus community over the next several weeks up until Election Day. So during early voting and through Election Day. So they will be posted on our Texas State edu/vote website. So we have a Texas State voter hub, information hub. And so we will post these videos there so that we can ensure that our community is informed, and for those who are unable to attend, because we know that there have been multiple political events going on, including tonight's vice presidential debate. So thank you all so much for attending, and we're signing off. Have a good evening. Bye.